Welcome to this very special episode of A Dog's Devotion. Today, our guest is Resting Reef, an extraordinary organization giving life back to our oceans and creating a legacy of love where our cherished loved ones can live on forever in the sea. But before we begin, I want to dedicate this episode to somebody so very close to my heart. This is in loving memory of Giovanni Mike Robinson, the beloved son of my dear lifelong friend, Josie Robinson. Giovanni, or as we called him, Mike, well, his life was cut short in a senseless act of violence in Wisconsin last week, leaving behind a heartbroken family, a new loving wife, and a precious 6-week-old daughter. Josie, you and I have been friends since grade school, and I cannot find enough words for the grief I feel for you and your family. Robinson family, please know how much I love you. My heart aches alongside yours, and I know life will never be the same. Mike's light will live on forever, through the love of his family, through his daughter, and through all of us who will never forget him. This episode is for you, Mike Robinson, and for all families who carry immeasurable loss in their hearts. Welcome to A Dog's Devotion, the heartfelt podcast for every dog lover. Here we celebrate the unbreakable bond between humans and their dogs. Each week, we sit down with inspiring guests who share powerful stories of love, resilience, and devotion. From the joy of adoption to the heartbreak of loss and the healing that follows, this is a space where we honor our best friends, the ones who leave paw prints on our hearts forever. Today, I'm honored to welcome Aura and Louise, co-founders of Resting Reef, an award-winning death care service that's reimagining how we say goodbye to those we've lost. Their pioneering work turns ashes into stunning, living memorial reefs that both honor loved ones and restore marine life. It's a remarkable blend of remembrance and renewal, transforming grief into a legacy that heals our oceans as well. Ladies, it is such a pleasure to finally get the chance to speak to both of you. Your story really touched me because for someone who well, actually, it's been a year now who lost my soul dog. I was so intrigued by what you do and how you honor other people who have lost their dogs. And it's really important because grieving your pet is just, it's unbearable and it's really hard. So this is a wonderful way for owners like myself to honor them. So thank you. And I really want to learn from the two of you how you came up with this idea, how the two of you met, because you've got an interesting history and where you're located right now. So let's start with how the idea of Resting Reef first came to life.
Yeah, well, thank you first of all having us here and having us share our story and Resting Reef with your community and listeners. So Aura and I, we met for our university 5 years ago, but Resting Reef's journey started 4 years ago. We did a dual master's here in London at Imperial College and Royal College of Art, and it's called Global Innovation Design. But we started with different design interests. For me, it's always been around materials, sustainability, also looking into materials within the ocean. Then Aura has always looked towards the intangible aspects like experiences and services of design. And there was this competition at the Royal College of Art that was actually hosted by King Charles and Sir Johnny Ives. And they were asking students and alumni to come with creative ideas tackling climate change. And that's when we got together as a team, very much looking from scratch, like how could we do something towards climate change? And I was aware how native oyster reefs, coral reefs, a lot of reefscapes around the world are really suffering. They're endangered, but they're super important for our health and the planet's health. And so we were looking at how could we create something around supporting reefs. And it was an ideation session. And that's basically the idea that kind of got the most excitement was the one that Aura brought to the table. So maybe she wants to, elaborate.
Yeah, I'd love to hear Aura. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I would say that my connection with Resting Reef started 7 years ago, and it came from a personal experience. So 7 years ago, my father unexpectedly passed, and it was something that completely changed my life and made me realize how the funeral industry has a lot to change. I went through the funeral process and I realized how bureaucratic, cold, and gray it can be. And also, it was this realization of figuring out that there were not enough ways or ways that felt meaningful to memorialize my father's legacy and my father's memory. So that really stayed with me. When I started the masters, I decided that I wanted to research death and understand why is it a taboo, why is it so complicated to talk about it, to chat about it. And I also wanted to understand people's experiences around the world, and also have conversations with experts to get a holistic view of the whole industry and the grief process, the emotional aspects that happen when we are grieving, etc. So part of that research involved understanding the different alternatives out there. And I discovered that there were these urns made out of salt that people were using in Mexico to scatter ashes. And I said, well, this is beautiful because it's made from a natural material and it goes back to the ocean. So it's a way of having loved ones, go back to nature. But then when we were doing this ideation session, I said to Luisa, what if instead of having an urn that dissolves, what if we create a strong foundation that becomes a reef, the beginning of a reef? And in the beginning, we didn't know how that would look like, if it was feasible or if it was something that was going to resonate with families. But as we continue with the process, as we continue researching, having chats with marine biologists, with funeral directors, with people that have gone through also a funeral process or, memorializing loved ones, we realized that this was a possibility and that this was something that we wanted to dedicate our time and efforts to make a reality.
I think that's amazing. So you do this for both pets and for humans, right? And also, I think it's important to mention that you're originally from Mexico City, and
Yeah.
I'm in Mexico City right now. And I know that the way they look at death is very different from people outside of Mexico. I mean, we celebrate death here, and that's been really helpful for me dealing with death and grief, because you realize, this person or this your pet is not gone. They're still here, and so we celebrate that. So it's really interesting, I think, that you brought that sense into this whole resting reef. I think it's really important because it is a celebration, right? It shouldn't be a sad thing. What I love is how you guys, the two of you, have come up with these urns, and how the marine life actually, it helps the marine life. So can you explain a little bit about the process of how the ashes, where they go, and then how the marine life and the reefs benefit from it?
Yeah, so what we do is that we allow families to have their ashes be incorporated into our formula, that we cast beautiful reef structures, and then we place these reef structures onto the seabed. And we've designed them with marine biologists and got a lot of customer feedback based on them also being beautiful, because they are, after all, memorials and should feel like a beautiful representation. And so what also is happening over time is that we are monitoring the impact. So we go back and do scientific research looking at the increase of biodiversity, the increase of fish in the area, documented with film, photos, and we update the families all along on that journey and kind of showing them the legacy of their beloved pets or their loved ones. And yeah, it starts with us working either with the veterinarians or the funeral directors to securely receive the ashes and bring it to the location and the community that we're currently collaborating with in Bali.
Now, once the family chooses the structure that they put the loved one's ashes in, are they able to view the photos that you take and the upkeep, so they can see what's happening with their loved one?
Yes, that is definitely something that is part of our service. This whole aftercare and follow up that we do of the reef process. But there's also some elements that we provide them to have closeness to their beloved pet. So, an example is a miniature version of the reef that is a representation of what is underwater. And this is something that they can have home, right? So, whenever they need something tangible or whenever they want to hold in a way their loved one, their beloved pet, they are able to have it closed. And something that I also wanted to highlight is that when we were researching and understanding how to build Resting Reef, we realized that ashes actually have a nourishing element for nature. So our bodies, our bones are made out of calcium phosphate. So it's very rich in phosphorus. And if you think about it, it makes sense because we are part of an ecosystem. So whenever
Mhm.
we die, or let's say our beloved pets die, the natural way, or what is intended in nature, is to go back to the cycle of life, right? So when we incorporate the ashes to our formula, what we do is make sure that they serve as a natural element or a fertilizer that nourishes marine life. So instead of becoming something symbolic or just a sculpture, these are living reefs. So actually, beloved pets become and are the essence for new life to thrive.
Right. That's really interesting. So I was and tell me if I'm incorrect when I tell this, but I was reading that your latest monitoring shows that 14 times higher fish biodiversity on the reefs in degrading areas. So there's proof that this is actually helping the underwater environment.
And that is just from our 6 months monitoring. I'm going back now. Actually, next week, I'm going to Bali again to bring more ashes and create more reef structures. But we're also doing our final monitoring. And yeah, we expect it to have an even increased number. So it's very
Wow.
exciting to see how it works.
Yeah. Now, all right, tell me how you chose or got Bali. Like, how did you get that location to put the ashes in?
I think it's several reasons that were super important. First of all, is that in that area, there's a need for restoration. So historically, there were reefs that had been devastated because of human activities such as bomb fishing, cyanide fishing, etc. So the local community is in need for restoring these reefs. And there are several initiatives over there that had been using the method of artificial reefs to restore the area. So it's also a place where communities are open for the idea of doing these reefs and know the benefits for it. Then another aspect was that our head of restoration and conservation, Dr. Zach Bogues, has 7 years of experience restoring coral reefs, specifically in Indonesia, and also has the experience of working with the local communities there. So there was this element of understanding the conditions, or let's say not starting from the scratch, but building from the learnings and understanding, and then improve when it comes to our reefs and our initiative. And then we will also say that Bali is considered a spiritual and sacred place where a lot of people go there for several reasons. So there was also this understanding that Bali becomes an island that is much more than nature and biodiversity, but also has this powerful element of healing in a way. So we consider these different elements and said, okay, this is an ideal location. It's also allowing us to create a pilot reef where we can take data and understand the marine biodiversity that is growing in our reefs, and from there see how can we replicate the model in different areas of the world, because in the end what we want is to have several locations, and for families to be able to choose the location that they want from a list of curated marine sites.
So, Louise, you mentioned that you're going to Bali shortly and you're bringing some ashes with you. So, I'm interested in how people get their loved ones' ashes to you, how long you keep them, and then the process of bringing them to Bali.
Yeah, so we are based in London. So of
Mhm.
course there's the physical aspect of ashes being delivered to us or directly being sent to the site in Bali with the partners we are working with there. But we are planning to do at least starting with 2 trips a year to go there and install reef structures. That allows us to reduce the cost, as in less flights and also the logistics, and kind of do it in batches in the beginning. And so, yeah, we would have a sign up list where people can show their interest and pay for a reef memorial. And then we will guide them on how the ashes best possible way can arrive either with us or directly to Bali. Yes, that's how we're planning to do it, also as we are expanding outside the UK.
I think that's wonderful. What's the response been from people who have given their loved ones' ashes to you, either Louise or Aura, whoever wants to respond to that?
I think, yeah, it's been extremely positive, and it's also something that gives us motivation. And it's also something that has been extremely humbling, because you realize how you are able to transform how people feel in one of the toughest moments of life, right? And it is definitely, as you mentioned, our beloved pets are families, are family members, and it's much more than an animal. So sometimes with the services out there, it feels like there is not enough closure, or it sometimes feels that death becomes an end stage. But with Resting Reef, there is this whole element of impact, where apart from that, there's the aspect of a celebration of life, and families and pet parents knowing that their beloved pet is creating something beautiful out there, and that
Hmm.
there's continuation, and that life is thriving. So suddenly, from something that it's only, let's say, cold and sad, it unlocks another layer that, of course, is not taking out the negative emotions, but at least is providing them more comfort into this whole experience of grieving.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, death care, as you both know, is such a sensitive and deeply personal space. It's really hard to navigate. So, because it's such a sensitive and personal issue, I'm curious for both of you, what drew you both to step into this field with such a bold vision as Resting Reef?
I think at the very early stage, when it was very much a concept, and we did interviews with people and also having sessions with advisors and mentors, it was really positive feedback from everyone. Like, people connected with it. They found, like, aligned with what we were trying to build and how we kind of see the cycles of nature. Like, all those positive responses of people like, oh, I would want this for myself. Or they would share things like, I lost my mother not so long ago, and if this had been available, that would have been exactly what she wanted. So responses like that really motivated us to bring this forward, even though it's not an easy idea to create into a reality. But we just saw there's a big need and demand for something like this, and if we're not creating, who else? And so I think that motivated us to take on the challenge, and also because we have that personal connection to it drives us every day.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I was going to say that that's definitely an element. Both Luis and I have grieving stories. For me personally, was my father. Luisa has the experience of losing two beloved dogs. So that connects us with let's say, the core of Resting Reef, and wanting to do something good for the people out there. But at the same time, it's like a compass that guide our personal motivation. So I do believe that by having these two elements, even if there's adversity, or if there's several challenges along the way, there will always be this force that is stronger to keep you going and to motivate you to do this and make things better, and revolutionize the industry.
What's the biggest challenge in creating something that's both scientifically sound and emotionally meaningful for families?
I would say, like, the fact that we are working in marine environment, which are very harsh, and whatever you put there would like to be moved by waves or degrade, or there's a high risk. And also today with climate change, you don't know if temperature rise or ocean acidification, and like, will it be a success, right? And at least trying to do the right thing is worth it than doing nothing. But on the other side, as I think Aura mentioned, death is a taboo. So it's not like, let's say, an easy sell that you put poster all over, buy your memorial end of life option today, sale. It's not that type of commercial product. So you always need to be sensitive, and also be at the right place when people are seeking something like a memorial service, because it's not on your mind every day, or something you, yeah, just look up at Amazon when you're in need.
No, you're right. I mean, and part of it is how people, I'm curious as well, is how people find you, because this is, death is taboo for most of the world. And it's something they certainly don't want to talk about or think about in the future to plan for someone, maybe say I would put in my will that I want my ashes to be given to Resting Reef. And then I know that there's something there and I take care of it. But we don't normally talk about death, and we don't talk about it at all. When it happens, it's normally a shock. Families obviously are responding really well, but how are they finding you guys?
There are several ways. First of all, it's been through our direct channels, so social media, Instagram mainly, or let's say our website. We have a form where people can reach out and contact us and send any type of questions, and they've been able to do so And it's literally Luisa and I answering each one of the questions and each one of the messages. And I would also say, because as it's an innovative solution, the media has also been very interested in covering us and covering the journey. So what we tend to see is that whenever the news or a platform is sharing about Resting Reef, we have a peak in interest and traction, which is amazing. We are super grateful. And let's say in the long term, how we see this happening is, we believe that collaborations with pets or funeral directors is super important, because they are the ones that are in the moment, when families are looking for memorial options, they are guiding these families. So we want to be partners, and we want to be able to offer Resting Reef, and that in every funeral home or every vet has a possibility of, just as they offer a burial plot or the possibility of like a scattering ground, etc., that Resting Reef is at the forefront as a sustainable option, but as also as something that is redefining death, and that is becoming also a celebration of life, and in a way also shifting the narrative and the perspectives in those moments.
I
Is there
would.
anything else out there, Louisa, that's similar to Resting Reef?
So there are a handful of, or a few companies in the US that's been pioneering doing reef memorials.
Hmm.
However, we were really wondering, why isn't this, more widespread and more available and well known? And so we're like, it's too good to kind of leave it there at the drawing board. Let's try to, make this really available for people. But we see like the interest in tree burials or planting a tree next to an urn is increasing. Like the trends are shifting towards green alternatives. However, there's really not that many options that could be considered green. There's something called water cremation, which is increasing interest in Canada, US, I think South Africa, Netherlands, and the UK have just legalized it as well. It's currently, from my understanding, the most sustainable way to treat a body. And what is quite beautiful is that it really aligns as well with Resting Reef, because as Aura said, um, our bones are made of, or mammals' bone are made of calcium phosphate. And through that process of water cremation, you end up with 100% pure bones. And so it holds 100% of that nourishing phosphorus, versus if you do the more traditional incineration, you end up with about 50% of that phosphorus. So we're very happy, that this is gaining more attraction, and also that it's a more green alternative. And then there's a recompose, like you can become soil. Yeah, but it's really not that many options out
Right.
there.
You were just showing, Louise, you picked up, I think, some of the sculptures. Is this what you put the ashes in?
So this is the
So,
miniature that
okay.
Aura described, the memento, the keepsake. So families, when they have our service, we offer them to have a small miniature that they can choose to have ashes incorporated into the formula, and it's the same design and material as we make the large reef structure. So it's very much like a small version to remind you of your beloved pet or your loved one, and also gives you that physicality that a lot of families wants to have, and limits them from, let's say, scatter the ashes, or doing something with it, because they really want that closeness
Right.
to them.
So the families are able to keep that sculpture, and then the rest of the ashes go into the ocean.
Yeah, and it's a big version of that small.
So how big is this structure?
Yeah, so the bigger design is about 60 kilo, and I think it's 50 centimeters tall and 50 centimeters wide. And the smaller one is 35 kilo. And then we placed them in Bali on these platforms that adds extra weight, but also elevate them from the sediments. So it allows sediment flow, so it doesn't get buried or tipped over by sediments. So yeah.
Wow. You've got the two of you have really thought of everything. Like you forget, when a structure is underwater, you've got the currents and you've got the fish, so you've got to make it so it doesn't move as well. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it's been a journey where we have mixed engineering, marine biology, design. As we are a startup, there's also this whole element of business. So it's been a challenging but very rewarding Yeah.
I'm sure. But have you spoken to some of your clients who have, or customers who have given their loved ones ashes to you? And is there a story from someone in particular that you remember fondly that you'd like to share?
Yeah, we had someone that reached out and were explaining like she had lost her father, and she wasn't really sure what to do. However, when she came across Resting Reef, she remembered that he had always had on his bucket list to go to Bali. So for her, it was suddenly like, wow, I can actually. He could have his final trip to Bali and do that with Resting Reef. We've also had someone that is really interested in diving and also had ancestors from Indonesia. So it felt like a real connection to the site as well. Yeah, we see definitely people care about the environment and the ocean. And yeah, just doing, as Aura said, creating new life is something that seemed to really resonate with people.
Yeah, it's like your loved one is helping restore the environment and doing something good, not just, you know, causing us grief when we have to go through their passing. What do you hope, Aura, that future generations will say about the legacy of Resting Reef?
Hmm. I mean, that is one of the core missions of Resting Reef, creating legacies that last for generations, because we see that sometimes the way that we act today, it's just focus on the present and focus on the immediate time, right? But for us, when you build a legacy with Resting Reef, where you are creating impact that will create ripple effect and that will last for a lifetime. So it's also something that will help local communities. It will create them jobs, but at the same time, the children that are then, becoming the people that are guarding the reefs or, snorkeling and learning about the reefs, creating a vibrant future for them. And I would say for our clients and for the people that see Resting Reef, we definitely want people to remember that Resting Reef is a new alternative where death is not the end phase and where there's hope afterwards. And there's this aspect of going back to nature and creating something beautiful from it.
I would also say that we do hope, that in the future that reef memorials will be a norm. So that if we can be part of, shifting the world of how we deal with and perceive death. And yeah, basically that we look back in time and consider it crazy that we were taking up so much land and doing these polluting practices that we do today or have done for generations. And yeah, that the world shifts towards more environmental conscious and circular options.
You've also started a memorial service. Can you tell me a little bit about this and how it works?
Yes. So for pets, we offer three different services. We have the community reef, where families can choose to memorialize a portion of the ashes. And what we do is that we will create a community, or let's say a pack for the afterlife, where pets will come together in one reef to restore marine life. Then we have the individual memorial reef. So this is a dedicated reef for a beloved pet. And this is for families that want to have their own memorial. And then we have the experiential reef, and this is the possibility for families to go on site, to have a ceremony in front of the memorial site, even have the possibility of snorkeling or scuba diving to visit the reef, and also meet the local community and the local traditions that it's super important to the whole process of building a memorial reef.
I think that's amazing. You mentioned your partnership with funeral homes and veterinarians. Who else do you see yourself partnering with?
For us, it's super important. Everyone, when it comes to end of life care, it's a great ally. So, hospice care, death doulas, funeral directors, pets,
Crematorium.
crematoriums. There's also lots of centers that provide end of life care for pets, and they're helping them, with different treatments. It's not only when the pet passes, but also beforehand, they are providing all of these wellness and care for beloved pets. So I would say that right now, anyone that is interested in distributing and sharing Resting Reef is a partner. And of course, activists, advocates for sustainable alternatives, advocates for different ways of approaching and coping death. That's definitely the type of people that we want to collaborate with.
Louise, where do you want to see Resting Reef expand to next? And where do you see it in, say, 10 years from now?
We have already in our pipeline to open a site here in the UK. So ideally Plymouth. We've been in conversation with a lot of the relevant stakeholders there, and they've all been very positive to a resting reef existing in their community. We've also been talking to restoration initiatives in Mexico as well as in Barbados. So those are the areas that we're currently looking at right now.
I'm curious, when you reach out to places around UK or to Mexico in the waters, is it tough to get permission? And who do you have to ask for permission to actually do this sort of work? Or I don't know if you wanted to speak to that question or not, or Louise.
Yes, it depends on the area. In Bali, for example, it's very much a bottom up approach where you need to have the approval from the local community and local leaders to be able to establish a project like Resting Reef. So, what we did was there was a whole process of field trips and getting to know the local community, presenting Resting Reef for them to then say if they wanted to collaborate with us or not. And afterwards, there's this whole process of then having chats with the government and establishing certain procedures. But for example, in the UK, is the other way around. It's a top-down approach where you need a permit from the Marine Management Organization. You also need to have approval from different institutions like Natural England that are the ones assessing the area and the seabed. And then you have conversations, or you need to have a lease from the Crown Estate that it's the organization that is managing the seabed, etc., etc. In Mexico, it's similar to the approach to Bali, but there's also the need for permits and licenses. But every time that we have the in the pipeline opening a new site, what we do is chat with the people that are already doing marine restoration and the NGOs that are already in the field, and of course also have conversations with people within death care, because that allows us to create strategic alliances and develop a site faster and also get those permits faster than, let's say, starting from scratch.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Now, if someone is listening and they're intrigued by what we're talking about, how can they start the conversation with their loved ones about choosing this sort of memorial, which goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where, death is taboo and we don't talk about it before it happens. So, I think it's important to start this conversation ahead of time. How would you address that? How would you get people to start the conversation so that they can say, yes, Resting Reef is a great idea and this is what I want to do with my ashes or someone else's?
It's interesting you ask because it's often people we meet again, or let's have a follow up on an email. They often say after they've just learned about Resting Reef through us, they're like, wow, I immediately had to tell my colleague, or like I went and told my wife, this is what I want, or maybe they share it because they're a little bit like it's a bit of a crazy story to share. Got this crazy thing you can do now, or even like this is what I want, like don't put me in the ground, never, this is what I want. And so I think regardless of how you connect with Resting Reef, and it doesn't have to be like talking just about what you want or what would be nice to do with your beloved pets, for example, because it's hard to talk about when that time comes. But I think it's more talking around it about, there are options. How can we mentally look for alternatives out there when we are not in a grieving state and it's difficult, to make decisions or think about it, but even do prepayment programs, something. And I guess it's to acknowledge like death is very natural. It does happen to everyone and everyone we love at some point, and ideally it doesn't come too quickly. However, by ignoring it, it can actually create much more pain afterwards for those who are left behind, because it's more of a shock. It's not having those conversations of what would our grandfather have wanted or what would my wife have wanted. Because if you're making decisions based on their wishes, and then it feels easier to kind of navigate the space.
Or how can people find you, reach you?
They can reach out to us through our social media. It's at Resting Reef in most of the platforms. Also, if they reach out to us through our website, that is restingreef.co.uk. There is a section where they can contact us, send us a message. And we also have an email that is hello@restingreef.co. So if anyone has a question, if they want to reach out for a collaboration, or if we can serve them with an experience of or a service like Resting Reef, please feel free to do so.
So as we were mentioning earlier, we are planning to do 2 trips a year where we will go with the local community and make reef structures. Depending on when that set date is, our next trip is around Easter 2026. So it's to start an early dialogue on how we could stress-free and in a safe way have the ashes delivered either in person. Let's say if you are traveling to London, or you have a family member or a friend traveling to London that's willing to bring it for you, that we could meet here and pick it up. Or if you're going to Bali as well, that could be, a personal delivery if that's wished. If not, we will guide on postal services. We're also building partnerships right now in California, where people can deliver the ashes or have it sent to our partner, and then we will go there before we go to Bali and pick up all the ashes that's been delivered there.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, congratulations, both of you. I think this is such a great idea.
Thank you so much for having us and for allowing us to share our story and the vision for Resting Reef.
I think you have a great vision, and I love the whole idea of Resting Reef. I wish you so much success.
Thank you so much, Carla.
All right, and Louise, thank you both for sharing your vision and heart with us today. Resting Reef is not only reshaping how we think about loss, it's giving back to the planet in a profound way. It's a reminder that even in death, love and life can continue to ripple outward, healing both people and the earth. Once again, your website is restingreef.co.uk, and your Instagram is @restingreef. Thank you both.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to A Dog's Devotion. Don't forget to hug your pup just a little tighter today, and always cherish the devotion only a dog can give. Aura and Louise, thank you so much. Have a great day. I'm so glad that we got to chat today.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on A Dog's Devotion. If today's story touched your heart, share it with a fellow dog lover. And remember, whether they're by your side or watching over you, our dogs are our greatest teachers of love, loyalty, and living in the moment. Until next time, give your pup an extra hug and never forget the devotion of a dog. I'm your host, Carla Bosacki. Thanks for joining me.